Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk Esports. Another video today, two so far this week, and hopefully a third tomorrow. Today, I wanted to go over my votes and kind of my thought process for All Pro for this split, as well as MVP and Rookie of the Year. If you actually do see the new episode of Gringos Liberados today that just dropped just a little while before I'm recording this. We did only vote for Rookie of the Split um, on that show and with the whole crew. And if you want to see my votes for that, it's over there. But I really just want to talk about Rookie of the Year. I think it's a much more interesting conversation, and especially considering the very limited amount of rookies that we actually had this split, there only being 4, and no shade meant here, but like 2 of them being Batau and Raven. It's not really an interesting or compelling conversation, because then it comes down to Frosty and Pro Delta, and that really isn't much of a conversation in itself. So I want to talk about more Rookie of the Year. Look at the year holistically for rookies, because it, one, brings more people into the conversation, and 2, it talks about kind of the progress of these players, and that is what the Portuguese broadcast is doing. But let's start with All Pro, then we'll do MVP and Rookie of the Year at the end, and let's talk through all of my votes. We'll start, of course, in the top lane. My votes were, I had third place FNB, second place ZZK, and first place Wiser. To absolutely no one's surprise, I have been on the Wiser hype train from very early on in this season. This guy has had an incredible split, and he was, on a Pain roster that had a lot of highlights, a lot of good play, and of course, you go 14-4. There's a lot of people doing things right. Wiser was the best player on this team, the most consistent player, and he just did so many great things. He just absorbed pressure like a fiend. He ended up with 10 solo kills this split, which is the most of anybody in CBLOL this split. And this is a dude who wasn't necessarily playing carries, right? He was playing kind of for his team, playing weak side. His Gnar pick was really huge for him. And the fact that he had more solo kills than a guy like ZZK, who's picking more heavily for carry-oriented picks, I think is really impressive. It also has to be said about how good of a split ZZK had. This is a dude who a lot of people were down on at the end of last split, and when we came into the split and INTZ decided to make no roster changes, ZZK was one of the folks that, or one of the players that people looked at and said, really, like, you didn't want to swap him out, but INTZ had faith in him, and rightfully so, because he was the carry top laner in Brazil this split. He was so impressive, a big reason for INTZ's success, and he's gonna be a beast in playoffs, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do, especially because I think he's hard to ban out. Like, it's gonna be hard to force him off of carry champions that he can succeed on and take the game over on, so keep an eye on him. And then F&B, after the top 2, the conversation around like All Pro top lane gets a little bit harder. FNB was in kind of a really tough spot here of being on this Red Canids team that has so many players that could draw resources, and of course being on a team with Titan, like, he is a lot of the times going to kind of take command in that front, and it is an 80 carry meta, so it even like doubles down on that. So FNB was not getting nearly as many resources as he would typically be used to. But I think he still had a really good split, and he ended up playing a little bit more of a similar style to Wiser, just kind of out of necessity, having to play weak side, having to absorb pressure, and I think he did a pretty good job. So that's why he ended up getting my third place vote there for top lane. Let's go to jungle. In this one, Red Canids do get big honors here. In third place, I gave it to Carioca. Second was Yappy. And then first place was Aegis. And when you talk about a team that has so many different parts of the map that are demanding resources, that have that kind of talent, we joked about on the podcast, talking about how it's, Aegis kind of running around with, multiple different leashes, trying to kind of keep everybody in line and working. And the fact that this team played as well as they did, they finished 14-4, tied for first place. Of course, they end up getting second because they lose the tiebreaker. I think Aegis deserves a ton of credit for that. And he was, it really felt like his play was almost unimpeachable this split. It was so clean. It was so good. It was so consistent. Playing on a bunch of different picks too. I talked about it on the podcast in a split where the meta was so heavily dominated by really that Sejuani Maokai trade that most teams were more than happy to go for. There were so many games where one team just said, okay, we want the Sejuani over the Maokai, and the other, you can have the Maokai, and the other team went, sure, like that's totally fine. Aegis only played 3 games on those 2 champions combined. He was playing a bunch of different picks. Wukong was his most played in the split, but that was only at 4 picks. So really had a pretty deep champion pool this split. And did a lot of great things, and I think he's a big reason why this roster succeeded, because I think it's so hard, again, to deal with 3 lanes on the map that want resources, and I think the fact that it worked as well as it did is a credit to Aegis's early game and what he was able to get going and how he was able to move around the map. So credit to Aegis. Second place, Yampy. If you've watched any of the broadcasts, you know that I've been beating this drum for a while. Yampy, I think, is a big another big reason why we saw INTZ really rise to some success this split, and they looked really impressive. His early games are really, really good. Really good. And the big thing we needed from this roster after last split, when they were really struggling, was that it felt they had a lot of good pieces, but it needed to come together. It needed to feel like they were on the same page. And I feel like Yampy did that. He, along with Nia, really kept this team in line and working well together. And I was really impressed. And I don't even think it was really close kind of after Yampy for, second place in All Pro. So Yampy really impressed me, and I think he's going to be very important if INTZ wants to make a deep run in playoffs and wants to try and challenge for a CBLOL title to return to international competition, which, they have not been to in a few years. So we'll see what Yampy can get done there for INTZ. Third place, though, Carioca. I don't mean this as a slight, but Carioca had, I would say, a relatively quiet split. And this is a player who, in splits past, has drawn a lot of criticism, especially from paying fans, when they have not been able to kind of cross the finish line. He has drawn a lot of flack. And some of that is deserved. I think in splits prior, his early game has been more susceptible. The problem would be was if Carioca got behind really the rest of the team, it wasn't like they weren't able to keep up, and they would lose games. I think it was maybe a little too much, because there were certainly, other parts of this team that were struggling. But Yampy got a lot of criticism, and I felt like, for me, he was just really solid all split long. He found the Ivern pick, which looks really good for him, and it's something now he's drawing a ton of bans on, because he just looks really good on it, and it kind of fits with the way that Payne wants to play the game. And he really was just very kind of clean all throughout the split. And for me, that's fine. I think that's kind of just all really Payne needs. Like, he doesn't have to be a superstar taking over the game from the jungle position. And I think that bodes well for this Payne team that's trying to finally kind of get over the hump here for the first time in a while and break this loud curse that they've been dealing with for 2 splits in a row. And I'm proud of what I saw from Carioca, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in playoffs. To the mid lane, in third place, an interesting vote that I was one of only 2 people to have this player on his ballot. I had Lava. Second place, I had Tinones. In first place, Denkato. And for me, Denkato was just a rock for Payne in the mid lane this split. I think he stepped up big time. His Ahri was really fucking good all split long. I believe he was 7-1 on the pick in 8 games. I really, really love what I saw from Denkato here, and I hope, it really feels like the entire map for Pain has leveled up, and I'm hoping that means that they can make another deep run here. You know, there were a lot of question marks after the only change that they made between splits was, you know, being pro delta at support coming in for damage, and whether that was enough. And I think if the same Pain from the end of last split competes this split with pro delta, it's not enough. And the fact that players like Karaoke cleaned things up, Denkato stepped up, Weiser stepped up, is a big reason why I think Pain is a big threat in playoffs. And of course, you know, they're the first seed. They should be. And I think Denkato is a big part of that. Second place, Tinones. I mean, what can you say? This dude was incredible. The big thing for Tinones this split was he's kind of played more of a facilitator role. He really has not had to be a primary carry for Loud through the 2 championship runs that they've had over the last year. And so you look at a player like this, but you know he's got carry potential and he has that kind of talent. If you go back to before he was on Loud, this is what he was doing, right? He was making his money this way, but for so long he's been kind of playing that facilitator role. And this split, when things were going so wrong early on, and he had a couple of rough games early on. I can't talk enough about how much I don't like his Jace. And granted, he's not alone in that. It's not just Tinones that is not looking good on the Jace, but he had a couple of stinkers early on in the split. But bot lane was looking good kind of from the start. And then when Tinones started rolling, we were still kind of waiting for Croc and Robo to figure things out on the top side. And so Tinones kind of picked up the mantle and said, okay, like, I'm going to start taking over games. He played the most champs, the most unique champions of anybody in CBLOL. The split, he played 12 all over the place. His LeBlanc was really good. His Syndra was really good. He played all these different things and really stepped to the forefront of this team, because this is typically a team that you look at the side lanes and it typically starts in top lane with Robo. And when Robo was struggling, Tinones took over and looked incredible. And now you've got kind of, as Robo has come online, this 3-headed monster on Loud that is going to be scary come playoffs. So keep an eye on them, and really impressed with what Tinones did and the way he stepped up this split to keep Loud in contention. And now they're in top 4, and they've got a matchup with Red coming soon. And then Lava. This one, folks were surprised by. This one for me, if you watched my video yesterday, the obituaries for the teams that are done in 2023, I said it, Lava was the best player on Los Grandes, and I don't think it was close. And this was a player that was drawing criticism at the end of last split, kind of felt like he was maybe one of the weak points on this roster. Bull certainly was another one, but Lava really had kind of a tough split 1 this year, and came in to split 2, and despite kind of the turmoil that was going on the top side with Trick leaving and then them sending Bull down and bringing up Hedon and everything that was kind of happening, you still had Ranger still kind of trying to figure things out at support. Lava stepped up, and I thought Lava was really impressive, and that's what he got for me. Some folks, you could certainly put House here. House, granted, had an up and down split, but I think House had a solid split. But for me, it was the big level up in play from Lava, the consistency, and the fact that I think he was the best player on this roster that got him that 3rd place vote from me. Now down to the bottom lane, which is one of the hardest conversations to have, considering how stacked the bottom lane is in Brazil and how many of these guys showed up and played really damn well this split. My votes were 3rd place, Bvoy, 2nd place, Titan, and 1st place, Bruncy. And we'll start there, of course. And I not much has to be said. If you watch the games, you know nobody takes the game over from the bot lane position in Brazil more than Bruncy. This dude is insane. He's so mechanically gifted. His positioning is really fucking good. His laning phase is also really, really clean. And, you know, unfortunately, the rest of his team kind of struggles at times and can kind of turn their brains off at moments. It's not like Brunsey hasn't had his, fair share of like rough performances this split, but if you're like, we need to pick up an 80 carry that is just impeccable in the late game and can take over a game and win us a game, it's Brunsey. And that's really it. Like, you could talk about Titans playmaking, and he certainly has it in spades, but there's just something about how often you know that Brunsey's going to get to the late game and he's going to make things happen, and he's going to be that reliable, high DPM player that is just so hard to compete with. And he was that player this split. I mean, Fluxu probably doesn't make playoffs without Brunsey, honestly. And there's a lot of talent on that roster, but just there were so many games where it felt like it just came down to Brunsey making things happen and keeping his cool and positioning well in team fights that I think kept Fluxu in it this split. And we'll have to see if it's enough to win them a series this time around. Second place is Titan. Titan is, as I've said before on the broadcast, Titan giveth, Titan taketh away. All right, he's going to make some blunders. He's going to be over aggressive sometimes, go for, a killer instinct dive under tower with Kaisa or something like that, or be in a position where he really has kind of no right to be, to try and get some more income to bring things back in a game. It's going to happen. But also Titan is going to make some incredible plays, and he did that this split. He continues to be the kind of engine from a carry perspective of this red team, and he's fucking fun to watch, man. Damn, he is fun to watch. Scary if you're a fan of red cannons, for sure, but he is so fun to watch. He is incredibly talented, and he's gonna have to be that guy here in playoffs, because red, is looking to, they got to get through Loud in the first round, and that's going to be tough. Then they probably have to match up with Pain next. And Loud's record is not, is not super clean, right? They have dropped some games, and we're going to have to see how it shakes out. But Titan is going to have to be on his game. He has been on his game this split, and he ended up in second place for me. Third place is B-Voy, and this really comes down to just how consistent this player is, how good his early game is. I mean, he didn't give up any first bloods all split long. He is one of the best laners in CBLOL in bot lane this split, and he just so consistently is able to generate early game leads, translate them into mid and late game power, and be just so good in team fights. And it's really, really impressive. And B-Voy has just really stepped up big time on this Pain roster this year. And I think it's really, really fun to watch. And I mean, Pain is scary, man. Pain is scary. You look at, me picking Weiser as my first team All-Pro, Denkato is my first team All-Pro, and then B-Voy is like third team, and you could even argue maybe he should be higher. I mean, they've got a wealth of talent on this Pain roster, and it's really, really impressive. I do want to note, because there'll be conversation, and rightfully so, about players like Root, for example, and we talked about it on the podcast, that Root had, I mean, I don't know if Root had a bad game this split, and I think that is important to point out. And I think you could rightfully have, some folks might have Root as like their first team 80 carry, and like that's not even, I don't even think that's like crazy for folks to consider. For me, I just saw the ability for Brunsey to take over game, the playmaking potential of Titan, and then just the incredible consistency and ability again for B-Voy to play really clean early games, build leads, and transition that into late game team fights. Value that a little more, but I think 100% Root belongs in the conversation. And if you have him higher than the 80 carries I picked, I think I totally understand that. So let's talk about support here, bottom of the map, before we get into MVP and the Rookie of the Year to close things out. Support, third place, I had Nia from INTZ. Second place, Pro Delta. First place, Seos. And Seos just continues to be the guy. I mean, definitely in the conversation, if not already claiming the title of greatest support of all time in Brazil. And, you know, for a team that struggled this split, as we talked about on Gringos Liberados, Loud kind of leveled up from the bottom up this split. It really felt like coming in right away. Root and Seos didn't miss a beat. Then it was Tinones that came online, then Croc, and then Robo. And Seos was a big part of why, you know, and not to discredit Root, as I was kind of just talking about his talent. Seos is, I think, another reason why Root looked so good and really didn't have any bad games this split. You know, the supports always have an effect on the play of their bottom laner, and I think Seos has been really impressive. His engage ability and his ability to move around the map is so good. And this dude is just, he's just so fucking talented. It's really, really cool. And we'll see if he can do it again here, and if, you know, if he and Loud can get over the hump and make it 3 in a row, which has never been done in Brazil. Next up is a true rookie, right? This is Pro Delta's first split, because technically he did play, I think, 4 games for Furia back in 2020, I believe, but that does not really count as playing your first split for me. I think you have to get to at least half of the split played for that to count as like your actual first split. So Pro Delta coming in as a rookie, the replacement for damage on this roster that is coming off of losing another CBLOL final. High expectations on this player, and Pro Delta delivered and then some. He was he was so damn good. And I mean, I can't wait to see what this Pain roster does, because it feels like they just have 5 really talented players and 5 players that can make plays and can turn games. And I cannot, you know, I could talk all day about how impressed I am with Pro Delta and the way that he came into this roster in the middle of the split. Meshed in well. Important to credit Bvoy. I believe if you watch some of like Pain's content, they highlight kind of the way that Bvoy really integrated Pro Delta into the team early on, and the kind of communication he was doing to keep he and Pro Delta on the same page early on in the split. And it really looked like it made that transition incredibly smooth. And then Pro Delta took it and ran with it and looked really damn good. So well done to Pro Delta. And lastly is Nia in third place at support. And this one for me, I know I've been the kind of INTZ cheerleader here for the last few weeks, but I had to put Nia here just because he, along with Yampy, I think Yampy and ZZK are like the biggest reasons why this team elevated their play so much, especially because Nia, similar to ZZK, really struggled in Split 1 this year. Didn't really have a lot of impressive performances, and there were a lot of question marks around this player. And he came in here, the way he has moved around the map in the early game. You know, teams have talked about how he and Yampy love to come mid lane and make things happen early on and open up the map. And then his play on engaged champions, like I think his rel is the best in CBLOL, and it's not even close. Nia was really good. Nia was really, really good. And he's going to have to make some things happen in playoffs, because, you know, it's going to come down to him and Yampy to likely set up a lot of team fights for this team and to be getting them going in the early game. But I really love what I saw from Nia this split. It was really fun to watch. Now, these conversations will be a little shorter because I've already talked about almost all of these players. Like the 6 players that I have for my votes for MVP and Rookie of the Year, 5 of them I have already talked about, so I won't go super deep into this, but we'll start with MVP. Third place, I had Titan. Second place, I had Weiser. First place, I had Brunsey. And here, for the CBLOL broadcast, Weiser did end up getting our MVP honors, and I think rightfully so. He was the best top laner in the league, best player on his team. Really, really impressive. And you can't talk enough about him. But for me, I just value what I talked about earlier, that late game insurance. That ability for Brunsey to kind of take over the game and make things happen. And even if he has to 1v9, he can do it. And then Titans playmaking potential. I think you can certainly make arguments for a player like Bvoy, and as I talked about, his ability to build leads and then transition them into late game is incredibly valuable. Both that could put him in that conversation. And of course, Seos and his play for sure. But for me, I value kind of Titans' ability to make these big plays to turn games on their head and bring things back for this Red Canids roster. But Bruncy wins it for me. Weiser in second, Titan in third. Lastly, Rookie of the Year. Rookie of the Year. Third place, I had Zai, who important at one Rookie of the Split honors last split. And you'll see a theme here. Pro Delta in second, and then Nia in first. So all supports. And that is, I mean, mostly where we had our notable rookies this year. Of course, we had Batau and Raven and Juliera and a handful of others, but the best players, and even IU last split, right? So the best players, the best playing rookies were playing support this year, and there was a wealth of them to pick from. Zai, dude's really good, man. I love his pike pocket pick. The fact that he draws bans on that is awesome. He really can mix things up in terms of his champion pool. He was so good, and definitely not the problem in split one there. And then coming into Furia here was a big part of them kind of coming out of the gate as strong as they did. Unfortunately, it didn't continue, and they missed playoffs in the end. But overall, I think Zai's year was really impressive and a good statement, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he grows and develops even further, because I think he's only going to get better. Pro Delta goes without saying. If it was Rookie the Split, I'm picking Pro Delta for sure. And this might sound weird because may look like, okay, but Nia did play great last split, and then you think the Pro Delta had a better split than Nia this split, then why wouldn't it be Nia, or why wouldn't it be Pro Delta as first? But for me, it comes down to the development and growth that we've seen Nia over this year that gives him my Rookie of the Year honors. And I think he was really good. And also, I don't think that there's actually a huge gap between the play of Pro Delta and Nia right now. But I think part of it comes from the team. You look at, Pain, and it's a really stronger roster, and not to take anything away from Pro Delta, but that does kind of elevate how he looks and the way he plays. And he's certainly stepped into those shoes well. But I think Nia on a team that has had to kind of scratch a claw a little harder and has had to get some growth here, I think Nia has done a wonderful job and has really flourished. That's why he gets it for me. But can't talk enough about how good Pro Delta was this year and how much he deserves kudos, because he was really, really impressive. And that is, a hell of a rookie split there for Pro Delta. But that does it for me, folks. I'll run through the votes just one more time, top to bottom. Top lane was Weiser first, ZZK, then FMB. Jungle was Aegis, Yampy, and Carioca. Mid was Denkato, Tinones, and Lava. Bot lane, Bruncy, Titan, and B-Voice support, Seos, Pro Delta, and Nia. MVP, Bruncy, Weiser, Titan. And then Rookie of the Year, I had Nia, Pro Delta, and Zai. Let me know in the comments who has your votes. I'd love to see your ballot, or maybe your thoughts on some of my votes. Definitely would love to see the discussion. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and keep an eye out tomorrow. I will have one more video dropping this week, and it'll be my thoughts and predictions on our 3 best of 5s here for the first round, because this weekend we've got 3 best of 5s. It is Fluxu and VKS on Friday. Saturday, we've got Pain and INTZ, and then Red and Loud on Sunday. So keep an eye out for my predictions video tomorrow, and then make sure to come out to twitch.tv/CBLOL English all weekend long to watch some great Brazilian League of Legends playoffs kickoff this Friday, and I can't wait. I hope you can't either. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, folks, and I will see you in the next one.